Good evening and welcome to a new edition of Historical Sketches. The notion of a world upside down has a long history. Some have found pictorial references in original Egyptian papyruses, though it was mostly developed in folklore and literature during the Middle Ages. This meme, as we would call it today, has had various interpretations. One was the representation, the projection of an impossible utopian reality used as a reference to express a wish, or an evasion from reality, as in the carnivals, or an aspiration and desire to remake the world, where fortune, although always blind, spreads her bounty, let's say, more fairly. An echo can be found in the lore of the Mexican piñata, where common people, with the help of blind fortune, can free up a symbolic abundance associated with the candies falling from the broken clay pot, and share the bounty with others. Alternatively, the allegorical representation of a world upside down were used to impart various common sense suggestions. For example, in the 19th century, a print became popular in Italy, purposely titled "The World Upside Down." The print was typically sold and hung on the walls of average households, roughly, we could say, the middle class of the time. Its representation showed common aspects of reality, but completely reversed. The prints used images of animals to make the point. Somewhat like Aesop's fable, but in their world upside down version there was more interaction between man and animal rather than between animal and animal. For example, 3 pigs are shown butchering the butcher, with the script, "This man used to butcher, but now he himself is butchered. Such is the destiny of him who wants to find a reason in destiny." In another frame, a donkey rides on the back of a man wearing an elegant dress and hat, with the script, "Often we see today, for the amusement of others, the ass above and the gentleman below." Outside the realm of allegory, literature and poetry intervened when sociological circumstances, we could say, have altered or even turned upside down accepted values whereby most of us run their lives. Shakespeare offers a good selection. For example, "All is uneven and everything is left at 6 and 7, says the Duke of York, concerned at the state of confusion and simmering feelings of rebellion brewing at the court of King Richard II. An associated recurrent theme is the oddity of the weather, reflecting or a related cause of the oddity of humans' behavior, as in Midsummer Night's Dream. The spring, the summer, the chiding autumn, angry winter change their wonted deliveries, and the mazed world by their increase knows not which is which. Today we would call it global warming, but the world upside down is also a perceptual instrument for describing either a regrettable event with wider implication, or a sociological phenomenon, such as a drastic mutation in the collective view of the world. Changes at great odds with what is accepted either as a convention, or a custom, or a logical way of explaining the world and conforming to it, until the advent or the occurrence of the change. An example is today the beatification of transgenderism. The imagery described in The World Upside Down also reflects the suddenness of the change. Not always, however. Macroscopic changes in the perception of phenomena, or mass behavioral changes, or mass acceptance of great changes can occur without the subject or the subject involved being actually aware of it. 2 examples. In the 19th century, Napoleon's glorious and nationalistic fervor inspired the growth of similar ideals among different ethnic groups or whole peoples, especially notably in Europe. But it was not what today we would call a mass phenomenon. For example, In 1860, the year before Italy was declared a nation, Garibaldi, the intrepid leader to whom streets and monuments are as yet dedicated all across Italy, he decided to liberate Sicily or invade it, depending on different points of view. Points of view still extant today, by the way. Sicily belonged to the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, where Sicily number 1 was the island thus named originally, whereas Sicily number 2 was part of the geographic boot of Italy, running from south of Rome to the Sicilian Strait, with Naples as the capital of the kingdom. Garibaldi landed in western Sicily under unofficial English protection, and proceeded to advance and overrun the forces of the Bourbon king that engaged him in various battles. When entering a new conquered city, the people, suitably fed by the propaganda machine of the time, came out to look and cheer. The meme, again as we would call it today, was that Garibaldi had come to unite Italy. But Italy was then what was called the geographical concept, as Metternich, the Grandmaster of Austrian foreign policies, defined it, Italy that is. Nevertheless, the promoted collective shout was Viva l'Italia, hail to Italy. But many among the unschooled applauding folk thought that Italia was Garibaldi's wife. Language could have been a unifying factor, but less than 3% of the Italian population spoke what we call today Italian. To create unity more than new laws, constitutions, flags, and folklore, myth was, and still is at large, a helpful ingredient. In this respect, Mussolini invented, for Italy, a bland latter-day resurrection of the Roman Empire. Not to justify him, but he had at least the decency of not claiming that Italy was the exceptional nation, Obama style, we could say. Rather, he relied on a mixture of historical pride, lore, and romanticism. When he decided to invade and colonize Ethiopia, or Abyssinia as it is also called, the lyrics of a popular Italian war song scored for the occasion went, "O beautiful black face, pretty Abyssinian girl, we will give you another duce, another king." It is doubtful whether the pretty Abyssinian girl could be impressed by the idea of another duce or king, but the song became popular, at least in Italy and among the soldiers. With the temporary exception of Germany, Italy, and Spain, and setting aside the USSR, which is a historical and conceptually separate issue, the notion of independent states with governments elected through popular vote has been, as we know, the accepted conventional best of all possible political systems until and after World War II, and really I'm referring only to Europe. However, since the year 2000, arbitrarily taken as a historical marker, this conventional best of all possible system has undergone remarkable transformations. Within the limits of this video, we can only explore some. However, perhaps more interesting is to explore the origins and the sources of the changes. Or, as a character says in the play Henry V, there is occasion and causes and wherefore in all things. And this on the principle that some personalities, little known to the public at large, affect ideas and historical events more than most popular or famous protagonists. Wilhelm Reich, for example, Freudian psychoanalyst, cultural Marxist, and the product of the Frankfurt School, is the spiritual father of the 1968 revolution, the building block of many of the theories and practices that were to be eventually so openly and patently displayed since the year 2000. One important personality still influencing current times is Leo Strauss, who lived from 1899 to 1973, a chosen people intellectual who immigrated to the US from Germany. Though relatively little known at large, his theories and philosophy are the foundation of the neoconservative, neoliberal movement and related power politics. We can say that the Straussians, a few dozen personalities yielding enormous power, are the real architects of American wars as an instrument of the American empire. Strauss admired Hobbes, whose thought could be summarized as follows: all men are scoundrels and only fear can restrain them. Some experts will say that my characterization of Hobbes is superficial because he demonstrated his thesis with hundreds and hundreds of pages. Nevertheless, as Leo Tolstoy said, every important idea is simple, and my summary of Hobbes thought has the benefit of simplicity. Strauss admired the cynical methods of Machiavelli, the Renaissance political thinker, to whom we owe the adjective Machiavellic as a euphemism for devious. But Strauss disliked him, Machiavelli, because Machiavelli should never have divulged the secrets of successful politics and politicians. What makes Strauss' thought stand out as an ideological flag carrier is his belief that the wise and clever people of antiquity, and of all times for that matter, more than wise, were scoundrels. Their supreme skills were reticence, impeccable duplicity, subterfuge, deceit, and concealment. In other words, they were, or had the skills of, consummate mafia bosses, like the authentic godfathers of the movies. Therefore, hence the necessity to understand the concealed meaning of speech, to search for the hidden truth, for the symbols, the encrypted messages, the secret teaching and codes as exemplified in Freemasonry. And just as in Freemasonry, the teachings that could be summarized as how to become a successful godfather must be strictly concealed and secretly imparted to a narrow circle of carefully selected individuals. In other words, and I apologize for the deviation from my usual language standards, for Leo Strauss, the ideal politician is a son of a bitch. And here is a glaring example of the world upside down concept. In a previous video, I included a video clip in which Biden publicly called son of a bitch the Ukrainian Attorney General who had indicted his straight, honest, and hardworking son Hunter Biden on the grounds of corruption. And unless the Ukrainians fired the attorney, America, meaning technically we the people, would stop sending to the Ukrainian government however many billions had been already approved as a loan. But returning to Strauss, he was, above all, the tenacious builder of a political order, an order oriented not to the common good or sense of justice, but to power, and power founded on a materialistic conception of history and of a diabolical, perverted vision of man. His inspiration was the discovery, or according to him, the rediscovery of esoteric Greek teachings that led, according to him, to the following conclusions. Philosophers and prophets created culture and morals, and there is no disagreement here. Philosophers should be legislators. Again, nothing new, as it is really one of the original thoughts of Plato. However, because truth is dark and sordid, the management of dark and sordid truth should be the domain or monopoly of the enlightened few. And here is the philosopher's stone of Strauss' neoliberal thought, we can call it. The enlightened few must adapt their own thought and behavior to the darkness and sordidness of human nature and act accordingly. Therefore, they must pretend to believe in conventional morals, mass fictions, and illusions My cat wanted to express her point of view. But as I was saying, the Straussian rulers, they must pretend to believe in conventional morals, mass fictions and illusions for the benefit of multitudes. Strauss defined what we call hypocrisy as the noble lie. Said it another way, nobility is proportional to perversion. Strauss' illumination was the discovery or rediscovery of, he called, antique reticent writing. Reticent writing does not reveal, but conceals the mode of operation of perennial good philosophy, so-called good philosophy. In turn, this is traceable to the Greek philosopher and historian Xenophon, who, Xenophon, for example, suggested to frame a question to the oracle of Delphi so as to produce the answer that the good fathers wanted. A modern example, with only minor variation, is the vial of milk produced by the totally not missed Colin Powell at the United Nations, claiming it was evidence of Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction. But returning to Strauss, for Strauss, culture and morals are the products of philosopher prophets. However, since truth, as I said, is dark and sordid, legislative responsibility is reserved for the enlightened few. Not, however, in order to help make truth a little less dark or sordid. On the contrary, in public, the philosopher must pretend to believe in mass illusions built for the use of multitudes. Strauss, as I said, called it the noble lie, a duplicity applied by a power that pretends with great care to believe in principle and values good for us, the simpletons, while the New Age philosophers simultaneously disapprove the same principles and values in their reserved corridors of power. In Strauss' teachings, the wise godfather must publicly show himself to be a paladin of justice and of unselfish goodness, while, secretly, he teaches to the selected and illuminated that truth is a secret, the people can be manipulated, justice favorable to the friend and unfavorable to the enemy. According to Strauss, all great philosophers were esoteric writers with a double message, one of salvation for the masses, the other of power for the selected few. Justice is in the interest of the strongest. Whoever is in power makes the rules to his advantage and calls them justice. The impact of Strauss on the intellectual life of American elites was among the most influential in the 20th century and beyond. The Straussians, a small but very powerful minority, are in power in the West, and lying is the normal form of relationship between the people and the oligarchy, between the dominant and the dominated. In particular, Straussians are a group of academics, thinkers, politicians and businessmen who have led American politics on economic and power issues for actually decades. Some consider them a sect, and in fact Strauss's first disciples were an almost secret circle, mostly consisting of members of the chosen people. To them was reserved the most cryptic and esoteric teaching, transmitted in oral form. The lessons to the chosen were imparted as private conversations. There are in fact no written records, only indirect references. The leitmotif of those secret teachings, esoteric in the literal sense, was the need for a strong centralized power and the conclusion that liberal democracy cannot survive unless directed by a higher power endowed with coercive force. Strauss was convinced that the works of the ancients contained a truthful concept understandable by the few but unsuitable for the many. As mentioned, he stressed the principle of the noble lie, meaning that it is morally right to lie for a higher end, which is power. A principle to be implemented in the public activity of the chosen, starting from the agitation by his followers against the lessons of teachers with an adverse orientation, which explains very well the criminal nonsense taught at large by current academia. Such, for example, that sex is an option and mostly a state of mind, and it seems incredible, but readers may have read or heard that male criminals who claim to have changed sex were moved to female prisons, resulting in a number of pregnancies. History must be destroyed because it is racist. But race is a construct, but at the same time, the white race must be destroyed, as I showed in a previous video. The goal was and is a kind of continuous struggle applied to geopolitics. A state determined to survive and exercise a will to power, and in fact Nietzsche was considered one of Strauss' references. A state determined to survive and exercise its power must be permanently at war. For peace carries within itself the seed of decadence. The foundation of society is a cohesive elite whose principles are distinct from those officially conveyed. Someone is destined to lead, the majority must be directed, and only those aware that there is no morality in power are worthy of exercising, and this is a very important point. Only the immoral are capable of power. Strauss still argued that morality is indispensable but for maintaining order and for the internal cohesion of society. Religion is the pillar of the social order, and in a slight deviation from Marx, for whom, as we know, religion was the opium of the people, for Strauss it is a holy fraud, an effective instrument of politics, the glue that unites society, useful and necessary for the masses, but not for the rulers. This jumble of ideas has driven American foreign policy since the disbandment of the Soviet Union, helped by its overwhelming influence on economy and culture at all levels. Equally, the Straussians have driven both the hybrid and hot wars everywhere by their presence in the key position in both the Republican and Democratic U.S. administrations. Examples are Elliott Abrams, Paul Wolfowitz, and Richard Perle. Curiously, there is also a school that is both Straussian and Trotskyist, the equivalent of Trotsky's permanent revolution applied to continuous hybrid or direct wars. From this school, it has become both popular and trendy, the idea of being simultaneously filthy rich as well as a Marxist. The New York Times offers a classical and historic example. Acquired 130 years ago and ever since run by a family of the chosen, it has essentially directed, inspired, and driven American foreign policy, but also internal, up to this day. On May 5th, 2018, on the 200th anniversary of the birth of Karl Marx, the headline went affectionately, "Karl, you were right." The current ex-Trotskyist became mostly Republicans and exponents of the so-called Neoconservative movements. The movement is a rich linguistic source of Orwellianisms, as the conservatives are among the most effective agents for turning the world upside down. Wolfowitz is the father of preventive wars as well as the axis of evil. For Wolfowitz, it was not sufficient to end the Soviet Union, it was necessary to end Russia. And the neocons became the architects of the NGOs and of the Soros-linked National Endowment for Democracy and Open Society. Both were instrumental in all color revolution, starting with Tiananmen Square, the bombing of Belgrade and the destruction of Yugoslavia, the Georgian Rose Revolution and related war, the Maidan Revolution in Ukraine, and the role of Victoria Nuland, wife of Robert Kagan, who said that we need another Pearl Harbor not long before 9/11, these people are still in the minds of most. Kagan also advocated the stronger hegemony of the US over Europe, seen today in the monolithic European position towards Russia. After the very obscure 9/11 event, Wolfowitz inspired the Iraq War. As we know, the weapons of mass destruction were but a practical application of Strauss' strategy of the noble lie. But equally Strauss-inspired was the lesser-known Chebrovsky doctrine, namely that colonial wars are too expensive, but armed conflicts can be extended indefinitely in failed states. Without a state to negotiate with, the theft of resources is easier. A current example is the occupation by the US of northeast Syria and the continued appropriation of Syrian oil. Current Russia is a critical ideological obstacle. After the Navalny failure, people know, new strategies were necessary. In this respect, it may be arbitrary but inevitable to compare the tactics employed with the COVID pandemic or phenomenon with those imposed to force Europe into self-castration. Strauss may be the ideology of today's world upside down, but an undeniable sociological truth is equally at play at large, irrespective of Strauss. It is quite comfortable to believe that what authority tells us is true, and quite uncomfortable to raise a doubt. Even so, though freedom of speech is practically gone, even the large but comparatively modest alternate media is a concern for the Straussians. To prevent problems, the US administration has just established a new Ministry of War against Disinformation, and I'm not making it up, under the presidence of one Alejandro Mayorkas, who Orwellianly said in Congress,
"We have so many different efforts underway to equip local communities to identify individuals who very well could be descending into violence by reason of ideologies of hate, false narratives, or other disinformation and misinformation propagated on social media and other platforms."
Prime Minister of this new ministry is a Nina Yankovits, a graduate of Georgetown University, a self-recognized expert of disinformation and famous for a karaoke performance where she says that the Hunter Biden's laptop of corruption was a Russian invention, a proposition that Biden also used in a debate with Trump.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plan.
And here is the karaoke.
Information laundering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious. It's how you hide a little lie, little lie. It's how you hide a little lie, little lie. It's how you hide a little lie, little lie. When Rudy Giuliani shared bad intel from Ukraine, or when TikTok influencers say COVID can cause pain, they're laundering disinfo and we really should take note and not support their lies with our wallet, voice or vote. Oh!
I will stop here because the reader may have captured the profound contempt that these people, the Straussians, of whom Yankovits is a disgusting but minor exponent, have for the rest of us. Possible reactions by some Americans could be, whereas they blush, but he who harbors these thoughts has not understood the reality of the world upside down. Therefore, probably, we can say farewell to the European continent that had a great future behind its shoulders. Thank you for watching, see you next time, and as always, may all the number of the stars give light to your fairway. Good night.